Hey y'all, welcome back to the Things Come Together podcast where we talk about the history of soul food and how we made magic out of our toughest moments. And good morning, sunshine. Today I'm feeling good. It's a good day. I feel like I was in a funk for a while and I'm coming out of it and I feel very excited about that. And it's interesting too because usually as the weather is starting to change, mood is not that great, seasonal depression, but I'm actually feeling very energized right now. So I'm excited about that, keeping that good energy going. I got some good news yesterday just about my rent and everything. So, it's been good. It's been good. I'm trying, like I said, keep this energy going. I've been staying in more too. So I think I'm gonna get outside this weekend. I'm gonna find something to get into. So I'm excited about that too. I need to get some fresh air. So, and for how do we get here? So today's main dish is catfish, fried catfish. I made mine vegan this time. So I made it with hearts of palm and I made it with some spaghetti, some baked beans and some coleslaw. And it came out again really good. This is another dish as far as the fried catfish that I learned in the vegan cooking class. And it came out really good. And every time I cook, I'll take some of it to my mother and my grandmother. And my grandmother really enjoyed the fish. She really did. And it was so funny because she's I ain't never tasted no fish like that before. But it was good. And I was telling her, well, it's not actually fish. It's more of a vegetable. And she's oh. So she really enjoyed it. And like I said, my grandmother, for me, as far as cooking is concerned, is always a litmus test because she is the best cook that I know. So it's always good to get good feedback from her. And she was even make sure you bring some more of that back. Next time you cook that, bring some more. So it was good to see that she enjoyed it. And I don't remember what my mother said about it, but I think she liked it too. She was asking me more about hearts of palm, what is it and things like that. And I actually found out that hearts of palm, which I guess makes sense from the name, but hearts of palms come from the inside of a palm tree. And so when I looked it up, what is it? It actually was interesting because it was saying you have to be very careful about sourcing it sustainably because obviously if you got to get it from trees, that means that you cutting down trees to get it. And so that was a really interesting thing to be thinking about. And then as far as what it tastes like, it to me tastes close to an artichoke. And even when we were in the class, the person who was teaching the class, Brianna, she was telling us you'll usually find it near artichokes. And so that to me is what it tastes closest to. Again, once you season it, it starts to taste really good and closer to fish. But the natural taste to me probably tastes closer to an artichoke. But yeah, it came out good. This was good. And as far as the history behind fried catfish, this one is another one that we would have brought with us from Africa because Africa, as you know, especially West Africa, but anywhere around the exterior of Africa is surrounded by water. And so Africans were used to eating fish and seafood before we came to America. And then also Africa has a lot of rivers. And so they would have had access to catfish and other types of fish before coming to the U.S. And so once Africans got here, that was food that they continued to eat while they were here. And then also a really interesting part of African history when it comes to catfish is that it would have been one of the few foods that they did not have to depend on a slave owner for. So because they had open access to the rivers, whenever they wanted fish, they could just go and get it. And so there was a big part of self-determination when it came to cuisine and food for enslaved Africans. And so that was a really interesting thing for me to see because it's oh yeah, I never thought about that. You could just go get you a fish. You don't have to depend on nobody. Nobody has to give that to you. And so that was a really exciting piece of the history to learn. And of course, we fry our fish in cornmeal. And so I'm going to do an actual episode on cornbread. So I'm not going to go too much deeper into that because I talked about it a lot the last time too. So yeah, cornbread and cornmeal, like, and other things that I would compare to in African cuisine that I've had, like, have a very interesting history. And another interesting part of catfish too is that in the 1960s, when the cotton industry started to go down, a lot of black farmers flooded their fields and used them to start doing catfish farming. And so that was another way that it started to become more popular for African Americans as well. And then also it talked about, just in general, like the whole idea of soul food. Like, that was an interesting part to me that came up a lot as I was doing my research too, because I don't know why, but I just always thought like it was called soul food. But the term soul food didn't really come around until the 1960s. And it was during a time where they were like trying to do more around Black pride and have more of an appreciation of Black culture within the Black community. And so they would start to describe a lot of things that surrounded Blackness as soul. And so, of course, the food became soul food. And I also saw that it started to become really popular when Alex Haley, who wrote the autobiography of Malcolm X, used it in the book. And so that was a way that people started to pick up on it as well. So that was a really interesting history to me. Like, I never thought about how we came to soul food. And it's interesting too, because if you look at it, like, obviously we know that soul food is not necessarily the healthiest food, particularly for the body, because again, a lot of times it was made from the scraps and the parts that slave owners and white people during that time didn't really want, and so they would give it to the slaves to eat. And enslaved people had to make the best of it with what they had. And so obviously it's not necessarily the healthiest food for the body, but it is, like, it's good for the soul. Like, soul food is for the soul. It may not be for the body, but it is for the soul. Like, it's that comfort food. It's that food that you need sometimes. You just need it to, like, bring you back to self, bring you back to center. So I love that about soul food. And I also love that, like, a food that was created out of, like, turmoil, they called it soul food. Like, it's something so, like, spiritual about that to me. It's like, we are going through one of the most dehumanizing experiences ever known to humanity. And we called it soul food. Like, that to me is just, like, something about that is just so powerful to me. So I have been really getting into, like, the history of the food. I've really been getting into the history, and that was something that was really good for me. And also, I think something that was really good about the history of fried catfish is that fried fish in general was something that was very quick to cook, and you can make it in large batches, and so you were able to feed a lot of people. So that was another reason why fried catfish became so popular. And of course, they got into talking about, like, where fish fries became so popular, and originally it would be on a Saturday, but of course, because of, like, Catholicism and things like that, they started to become more popular on Fridays because of the Lent season. So yeah, it was really interesting just to learn about catfish, fried catfish, and the self-determination that Africans had around that dish. As far as the real life experience that I wanted to connect it to, I want to talk about health in general, because my journey to becoming a Black Southern pescatarian started with a health journey. And it's so interesting on, like, how health has been a focus in my life for a very long time, because I had asthma as a child. And so I would get really sick. Like, what would be a common cold for most kids, like, would be something very serious for me. And I spent a lot of time in the hospital as a child because of my asthma. Like, I even remember, like, one time we were supposed to go to Disney World and I couldn't go. Like, we had to cancel the trip because I was in the hospital. Like, I had pneumonia as a child. Like, it was really serious. And, you know, I don't think, like, it's interesting because it can be so common and it was just, like, a part of my life. But the idea of not being able to breathe is, like, you know, it's a very serious thing. Like, it's something that a lot of us take for granted, but it's just, like, it's a real thing. And I've never really processed this, which I've been thinking about, but it's also the idea of like, when you go to the hospital, that is a very isolating experience, because it's like, yeah, people can come and visit you, but when it's nighttime and everybody gone, like, you are by yourself. Like, you are by yourself. And I just remember those moments, like, just thinking about it as a child. Like, sometimes, like, I would be so sad at night when everybody would leave. You know, I would have my nurse, but even nurses don't really come around as much at nighttime. And they don't like interact with you a lot, especially. So that was a thing. But I will say, like, I had good experiences as far as like care when it came to being in the hospital. And I feel like, you know, people feel like especially bad for kids that have to be in the hospital. So I would have really good nurses that would like take me to the game room or take me to like this rooftop area to be able to get some fresh air. So shout out to all the nurses that I interacted with when I was in the hospital as a child. I was at Rush University during that time. So they had really good like nurses. And so it's been interesting. I'm not gonna go too deep on it, but I've had some adult experiences with Rush that I could have done without. But you know, as a child, y'all held it down, POP. And so that was like the beginning of my health journey. But as I started to get older, it wasn't as bad. So like as my teenager and a young adult, I didn't have that many experiences with like doctors and hospitals and like really just my health journey at all. But I remember when I came back to Chicago, I was still studying for the MCAT, and I honestly feel like between like the spiritual work that I was doing and like at the time very religious work that I was doing, and also studying for the MCAT and the way that we were learning the material, it started to make me more conscious about health again as well. And also some of my friends were starting to become more conscious about health as well, so it like just rubbed off on me. But as far as like the MCAT program, we were learning from a doctor who taught the information in a very different way, and it was so powerful because we would be learning it like project-based and life-based circumstances to connect the material to. And so I remember like we would learn about proteins and how they broke down in the body, and I did not know that if you don't use the protein that you consume, it turns into fat. And so those were some of the things that I started to become aware of and was like, okay, well, I don't need to be, if I'm not working out, I don't need to be eating a whole lot of protein because it's going to turn into fat. So that was like some of the things that started to like turn my wheels about health as well. And then, like I said, I had friends that were becoming more health conscious as well. So I actually had a friend who became pescatarian, and I was like, I think I could do that. And she's actually vegan now, but at the time I would have called her like a Black Southern pescatarian too, because she would definitely rearrange some meat around to get whatever that meal was. So I would definitely say that she was a big part of me becoming pescatarian. Her and another one of my friends was a big part of it. And so that was like a part of my health journey. And I also stopped drinking milk at that time, which I never really was a big fan of milk. It wasn't really my jam. But once they started making the alternatives, because during that time, like 2012 to 2015, the alternatives started to become really popular. So I would start off drinking almond milk, and then eventually I drink oat milk now, which is my favorite milk alternative. I like it because I feel like it tastes the closest to milk, even though I still don't really care for milk. But I really like the creamy texture of oat milk. So that's my jam. And then I also started drinking more water during that time. And I did not know, like, it wasn't until later that a doctor ended up telling me that, like, you're supposed to be drinking half of your body weight in water. And so my weight has always fluctuated somewhere around 200 pounds. And so that meant I need to be getting as close to 100 ounces of water every day. And so at that time, like, I was drinking more water. I didn't really have a goal for how many ounces of water that I was drinking. But I was already starting to become more conscious. And it's so interesting because, like, we did not drink water when I was younger. Like, I did not grow up drinking water, which feels so weird because it's like, how did we survive? Like, I feel like I've seen this on social media too. It's like, how did we survive not drinking water? Like, I don't know, but we were just fine for the most part. Like, you might have some extra acne, but for the most part, like, you lived a regular life not drinking no water. And it was so weird because, like, I mostly drank milk and juice. Like, I never really got into pop. I would always say, like, it's spicy. So I never really liked drinking pop. But juice and milk, like, especially juice, that would be my jam. And that's really all I would drink. And even when, like, when I was living in North Carolina, like, iced tea, like sweet tea, and lemonade was really popular. I never really got into the mix of things, half and half. Like, that was never really my thing. But I did drink a lot of sweet tea. And I'm sure I would have lemonade every now and then too. And so that was what I was surviving off of. And it wasn't until I came back to Chicago and started like cleaning up my eating that I actually started drinking water. So it's very strange on how I survived so long without water. But, you know, apparently it's a thing. And so that's kind of like where my health journey was for a long time until I started having like really serious mental health issues. And it was interesting because like I lived 27 years. Like, I had dealt with depression. So I can't say that I didn't know it at the time. But now looking back on it, I can say like, okay, yeah, I was depressed. Like, I remember one time when I was a sophomore in college, like having very little motivation. And it wasn't like something necessarily happened, but I just remember just like, I'm not really feeling this. Like this, but I never really felt like it was an option outside of school. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to figure out something because like at the rate I'm going, this is not going to end well. And I don't really know what else I'm going to do. So I was able to shake it off. And that's what I was thinking about too, is like a lot of the things that I dealt with as far as depression when I was younger, like I was just always able to shake it off. Like even when my dad passed away, that was a really difficult time for me too. I did not understand grief. I did not understand depression, but that was clearly what I was going through. And it took me a long time, but I was able to shake it off. And in general, just manage. Like, you know how they talk about like high functioning depression? I feel like I had that for a long time. Like I was able to still operate and move around, like difficult, but still able to move around. And so after like my dad passed away and everything I dealt with right before I came back to Chicago, like it was rough, but I was still able to make it. So I didn't have to focus on my mental health that much. But I will say the deeper that I got into political work, like that's when like the rubber really met the road for me. Cause it was like, child, you need to do something. Like you need to do something because you can't keep living like this. And so when I was 27, I had like my first serious mental health issue. And at the time, like I had tried the Western medicine because it was my first experience. I didn't know like what my options were. And I just knew that I needed to do something. Like I wasn't feeling well. I knew I wasn't feeling like myself. So I was like, okay, I'm open to trying anything. And the first medication they gave me made me first drowsy, which you will find in most mental health medications is like, it's going to put you to sleep, which sleep is a big part of managing mental health. So there is validity in that. But it's like, also, I can't operate as a regular human being because I'm knocked out as soon as I take this medication. And the medication I was taking was at night, but it's still like, I just felt, honestly, I just felt like a slave to the medication, so to speak. And that's a strong word. It's a strong comparison, but that's what it felt like because it was like, as soon as I would take it, it would knock me out. And I was going to sleep around 10, which is a healthy time to go to sleep. But it was like, if I wanted to do anything past 10 o'clock, I couldn't because I had to take this medicine. So as far as being able to go to like a concert at night or just be able to have a night out, like I couldn't do that if I was taking the medication. So then I had to make adjustments for it. And it was just like, I just did not like that. And with the medication, it was like, I could go to sleep at 10 o'clock and literally not wake up until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like mornings are difficult for me again because I tend to lean towards depression, but I'll at least wake up. Like it may take me some extra energy to get out the bed, but I'm at least up. Like with the medication, literally it would knock me out at 10 o'clock and then I would not come back until 1 o'clock. Okay. Unless somebody came and woke me up or I had an alarm on. So it was just, I really didn't like it. And it was making me hear noises and like, it would specifically make me hear like spaceship noises. And I wasn't hearing no noises before I was taking the medication. Like I've never had a history of hallucination, whether it be sound or sight. And so it was like, who thought of this? Like, who is out here prescribing this to people? Like, no. And it is a thing with mental health drugs where they'll tell you, like, it takes months to, like, regulate itself. And that is a normal thing in mental health treatment. It's like, oh, well, you know, we're going to have to monitor you for 3 to 6 months to see how you do on it, and we can make adjustments. And my thing is, like, I only get one brain. Like, that has always been my premise of, like, I only get one brain. I don't have 3 to 6 months for y'all to be, like, messing my brain up, basically. So I ended up seeing a doctor right after I finished, like, the outpatient program. And he was telling me, like, I don't want to speak badly on my colleagues, but I'm pretty sure that you were misdiagnosed. And I think you should start walking yourself off of this medication. And I ain't gonna tell no story. Once that man told me that, I did not look back. Like, I did not look back. And at the time, I was trying to get into, like, regular therapy, but it was packed. Like, it was like I just could not get into therapy. And so I probably would have, like, sustained therapy if I could have, but I couldn't get into it. And so that is a big challenge a lot of times for people who are trying to take care of their mental health. It's like, I'm being proactive, but I can't get access to the care that I need. But as far as that medication, like, that man told me to walk myself off of it, and I never look back. I don't think I ever seen that man. I haven't ever seen that man again. And it still took me a long time to get a regular psychiatrist just because I had had such negative experiences with Western mental health. So, or mental health treatment. So, that was my experience with, like, the regular medication I was taking. And at the time, I was also taking, like, this lighter anxiety medication. And he told me, like, that's basically like a sugar pill. But it's something that I would take whenever I would have to go to the hospital. Like, anytime I was in an extreme mental health experience, like, I would take it to, like, bring me down. And then I ended up talking to another doctor who told me that the long-term effects of that medication is Alzheimer's disease. So I'm like, okay, well, I ain't gonna be taking that either because I don't want to have Alzheimer's disease. Like, you know, we don't know what's gonna happen in our future, but I've always been a person where I'm like, I'm gonna try to do the best that I can to prevent anything serious. So I, like, stopped taking that medication and was really done with Western medicine as far as mental health was concerned. And in general, like, I'm not big on Western medicine. Like, it's interesting because I've watched my family, like, take pills, like, every day since I've, like, been alive. And I just always knew that I did not want that life for me. It's like, we have to take care of our health, and sometimes you just have to take it. Like, I was taking my asthma medication. Like, I didn't have to take medication for a long time. And it was something about, like, when I was a child and they started trying to get me to take that daily inhaler that I was like, not really interested. Like, I'm good on this. And then I, like, once I came back from North Carolina, and something about the air, like, if you've been to North Carolina, it's a lot of trees. I feel like that's probably a Southern thing in general, but it is a lot of trees in North Carolina. And so the air is a lot fresher as opposed to coming to Chicago. Like, air is terrible, terrible, terrible. And I live on the east side. So it's like, with all of the different plants and mills and all of that things that they have on the east side of Chicago, like, the air is even worse. Of the highways and things like that, like, the air is just really terrible in Chicago. And so when I came back, I started having issues with my breathing again. And at the start of the pandemic, it got to the point where I had to take a daily inhaler. And I've been able to get off of it now, but it's like, that kind of medication is like, it's nothing I could do. I have to take it. Like, if I can't breathe, I got to take something. But I knew, like, I did not want to be on, like, multiple medications. So that was also a big part of, like, why I started to, like, clean up my diet and things like that. And I will say, as far as diet is concerned, like, I believe in a nice little balance. Like, I'm not one of those people that's, like, strict. Like, I don't never eat these things. Like, yes, I still eat fast food every now and then. I still eat soul food every now and then. Like, these are things that I still eat. Like, I don't cut them out completely, but I do try to find, like, a good balance. Like, even now I'm starting to cook more soul food because of this show. But in the mornings, I'll still have a relatively healthy breakfast. So, like, I'll eat oatmeal and blueberries for breakfast. Or I may have, like, a cereal and eat it with apples. And it's still a healthier cereal. Like, I like the off-brand of Trader Joe's Cheerios, so I'll eat that. Which, like, I did not know that Cheerios, like regular Cheerios, was made with GMOs. Like, I didn't know that, but I found out, and so that's why I started using the Trader Joe's brand more. But or like I'll do a boiled egg and some fruit and maybe like a white potato, which is not necessarily the healthiest thing, but it's not the worst thing either. Like I used to eat my boiled eggs with biscuits, but I stopped eating that. So just cleaning up the diet where I can, again, drinking a lot of water, taking my vitamins to try to like be as healthy as possible. But yeah, as far as like the mental health medications, I was like, that's not gonna be my jam. But when I so I had that experience, and then I was fine for like 3 years, but again, because of like my situation at the time, like I had just started working in government, and I feel like in general, government is a very difficult thing to work in. Like we have all of these perceptions of like politics and how simple it really is. And in some ways it is simple. Like it's really like sticking to, like you have to have the courage to stick to your politics because it is so much pressure to do the opposite of what is in the best interest of people. But it is simple in the fact of like, this is what I believe in, and I'm going to govern in a way that is aligned with my morals and my principles. But for whatever reason, that can be very difficult for people. So it is more difficult than I would have anticipated, but it was also the political position that we were in because the ward that I worked in neighbored where the Obama Center is going to be. And so there was a big effort to try to gentrify that area because there's a lot of vacant land in that area. And so it's like you don't want to build this huge attraction and the neighborhood is empty. And so they're in dilapidated. And so even some of the housing stock that was there is like abandoned and things like that. So it was like a big push to try to get the neighborhood ready for the Obama Center. But it's like once you build new construction in the neighborhood, it's like the majority of people who already live in the neighborhood are struggling to cover rent. That's the big issue already. And then you build a new construction and the housing prices in Woodlawn was becoming ridiculous. And some of that was just because of housing prices and speculation and like the ridiculousness that the real estate industry has created. And then other parts of it is because the environmental issues in the neighborhood. Again, like I was talking about the air, the soil in most neighborhoods, really all neighborhoods on the south and west side of Chicago is really bad because of those same pollutants. And so developers have to put in extra money just to get the soil right so that you can build on top of it. And so that was also contributing to high housing prices. And so the people who were able to afford it, a lot of times was going to be white people because Black people ain't got $700,000 to $1 million to spend on a house. And I mean, just to be honest about it, people who do have that money, they're not spending it in Black communities because they feel like if I'm gonna spend $1 million on a house, like I can go get more land, I can go into an area that's so-called safer, and so that's what they do. So a lot of times it's not attracting Black people who have that kind of money. So that was like a big issue in the area that we were working in. And I think, honestly, that was why I was kind of going through the motions with my relationship because it was like, okay, well, I have to be able to be here to hold the line and like do the work that needs to be done in this time. And like, honestly, we was getting like mollywopped, okay? We really was. Like, we put up a good fight. Like, that I will say. Like, I think we put up a better fight than what people expected from us, as far as like government and community together against the powers to be, the mayoral administration that we was working with. Like, I know that we were a pain in their side. But it was like still like they was like coming left or right. Like every time we looked around, it was something that they was bringing that was like not good for the community. And then not only that, that's only one community in the ward. So we still got all these other neighborhoods that we got to make sure is getting just as much care and attention and development, that equitable and also like ethical development. And so it was just a lot going on the work front. So I think, honestly, if I had to think about it, that might have been the reason why I was more passive in my relationship, because it's just like, I was thinking about it the other day, like, how did you let this happen? Like, how did you get to this point? And I think the fact that, like, I had to expend so much energy at work that it was like, okay, I'm just here for the ride in this relationship. And I think also, like, my age played a big role into it too, because it was like, I'm 30, like, this is the time that I should be settling down, having some kids. So, like, you know, why not type of deal. And I just did not trust my gut the way that I should have in that relationship. And then ultimately, the combination of those things, but specifically the relationship, ultimately started to lead to the decline of my mental health. And I just remember, like, so like 3 years had passed, and then I had a mental health situation where I started experiencing intrusive suicidal thoughts, which was the first time that I had an experience like that. So I was like, yeah, I got to do something. Like, Western medicine is not going to be my thing, but I'm going to have to do something because I don't want to live like this. So that was when I started trying herbal medicine. And after a while, I just had to come to realize, like, this ain't working either. Like, it would always be something. Like, it's like similar to how they talk about with Western medicine. Like, you can't just like stop taking the medication, or a lot of times there's a lot of things about herbal medicine that we don't have as much knowledge about, and so we don't necessarily know how it's going to affect the person. So similar where it'd be that 3 to 6 months in Western medicine, in a lot of ways you also have to like test out the herbal medicine to see how it impacts you, and for whatever reason, like, it just did not have the best outcomes for me. So after a while, I had to like realize, like, okay, put the herbal medicine down, like, and I started to just focus on diet and vitamins and things like that. So I started taking a lot of the vitamins that they tell you to take for mood and like energy. And so definitely like my B complexes. I was taking salmon or any kind of fish oil. I was taking vitamin D because that's supposed to be good for the mood, and just like a daily vitamin. And so just getting as many vitamins in as I possibly could, and trying to do my best around diet, because one thing that I said, like I was saying, is good about herbal medicine is that they couple it with a diet plan. And so you get to see like how your body feels based on the different type of foods that you eat. And so that was becoming really helpful for me. But I mean, to be honest, it's like mental health is hard. Like, that's a hard thing to deal with, and it's no one answer. And honestly, at some point I probably was exhausting myself with everything that I was trying to try to regulate my health. But I feel lighter than I felt in a long time, and I love that for me. I really do, because navigating the world as a depressed person is very difficult. Like, it is very difficult. It just feels like you are literally carrying the heaviest weight that you can possibly carry to do every single thing that you have to do in a day. And that is a terrible way to live. Like, it really is. And, you know, I think it's definitely becoming more open for us to talk about mental health, but it's still like, you know, only certain conditions are cute to talk about. Like, let's be honest, like depression, you could get away with that one. Anxiety, you could get away with that one. And once you start talking about more than that, people start to look at you a little funny. So, it's like still we have a ways to go around talking about mental health, but I do feel like, you know, it is very difficult. Like, the day-to-day of being able to live in a depressive state is very difficult, especially if you're doing it unmedicated. So very difficult. And, you know, I deal with anxiety here and there. I deal with it more now, or not now, but like in the last 3 to 4 years than I have ever dealt with it before. Like, it used to be mostly just depression, but I have dealt with a lot of anxiety too. And I've even realized too, like when I had my DUI, that impacted my mental health a lot too, because it made me less assured in myself. And I've never really spoke to like formerly incarcerated people or anybody who have had like an encounter with the legal system to know like if that's a regular thing. But I know for me, like once I got the DUI, it made me question every little decision that I made, because it was like I realized how quickly like making the wrong decision can put you in a bad situation. So it started to make me like very critical of the decisions that I had to make. And at some point made me like a very indecisive person. Like, I would get stuck around decisions, and I had to get myself to a place where it was like, look, no matter what decision you make, you're going to be just fine. Like, you got this. Make the decision. But yeah, more recently I had started dealing with anxiety, and that's the thing too. Like, you got to be able to focus your mind, stay at what's at hand. Like, it is a lot. And so now to be in a space where like I'm created enough space for myself to be able to like navigate in a way that doesn't feel super heavy, doesn't feel like super pressing around decisions that I make. Like, I'm very thankful and happy about that. And you know what I will also say I feel like has been really good for my health, like eliminating stressors. And to be honest, I've had to realize that in my life, some of my biggest stressors were people. Like, seriously, some of my biggest stressors were people, like from relationships to work and things like that. Like, stressful. And what I've learned too is that I cannot be around people who are not managing their own mental health. And I've talked about this before. In my opinion, everybody's crazy. And if you're not crazy, then you're real crazy. So you pick one of the two. But because of that, and I would say also, especially for Black people, because of our history in this country and our current conditions in this country, like it would be crazy not to be crazy, to be honest. But because of the stigma around mental health, so many people are not addressing their mental health issues. And so it's like you could be doing your best to work on your mental health, but if you're around a bunch of other people that's not taking care of their mental health, it's only going to take you down. It's only going to take you down, especially a person like me, because I want to show up for people. Like, I want to do my best that I can to show up for people. And I've had to learn over the last couple of years, like, right now, I got to show up for Joan. Like, I gotta choose me. I got to choose me, Lucius, or whatever the line is. Like, I got to choose me. I got to take care of me because I'm drowning trying to be a support system for people who are not taking care of their own mental health. So I'm finally in a position where I'm doing my work, and you're going to have to do your work too, or else I'm going to have to take some space away from you. So that has been a big part of my health journey as far as my mental health. And then I've also recently shared that I have PCOS. And so that has been an interesting health journey as well, because I have a lot of the symptoms that you typically see with PCOS. So like, unfortunately, unwanted hair, acne, like I can get really bad acne. Weight is also like uncontrollable weight gain is also a part of it. And those are like the main ones that I have. I don't really get a lot of missed cycles. And I've learned again, eliminating stressors, that the only time that I really will have a missed cycle is when I'm in a stressful relationship, which is interesting because that's how I started to learn that something was off with my body. Because I remember like my first adult relationship that I told y'all about, I started missing my cycle. And so I was taking pregnancy tests and they would come back negative. So then I'm like, okay, well, it just must be stress. Like, I'm like, okay, I've heard that you can miss a cycle based on stress. So, okay, that's what it is. Not knowing that it was a deeper issue until I had like the suicidal thoughts. And then, which depression is a symptom of PCOS, but in this instance, I believe that it probably contributed, but wasn't necessarily the root of those thoughts. But my point is that once that experience happened, I started to get more serious about my health. And the fact that I was going to be getting married was like, okay, well, I need to make sure that my reproductive system is in a good space, or at least figure out what's going on, because, you know, I want to have kids. So that was when I finally got tests done, and it confirmed that I had PCOS. And so, that was when I started to know, because up until now, I thought my missed cycles was just based on stress. But I really don't have missed cycles, like I said, unless I'm in a stressful relationship, which is why I don't be dealing with these people. I be on to the next, which I think is interesting too, because like I told y'all a couple episodes ago, like I really haven't been doing a lot of dating lately, and you know, haven't missed a cycle. I obviously haven't eliminated all stress, but you know, have been living a lot less stressful life. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting the impact that relationships can have, particularly on women. But yeah, so I tried to do herbal medicine around my PCOS as well, because when I went to the doctor, they were telling me basically the only thing that they could offer me was birth control. And I've never taken birth control before. And so I didn't want to start taking it. I I think that we all should have access to birth control and every other type of reproductive service, but it just was never really for me, and I didn't want to take it because I've just heard a lot of bad things about birth control. Like while it does prevent pregnancy, the other symptoms that people have to deal with, I was just like, no, I don't want that, and it would only treat the symptoms. Like it wouldn't necessarily like fix anything. And so I didn't want to take it because I'm like, well, the symptoms are not that bad. Like I could deal with them. Like I would prefer not to have them. But compared to taking birth control, like, no, I'll take the symptoms. So I started trying to do herbal medicine, and that was making the situation worse as well. Like I started growing even more unwanted hair and having even more like issues. It might have helped with the acne, but other than that, like, it didn't really help. And honestly, even with the acne, I've learned that if I just drink enough water and stay away from like fried foods, and just generally dairy, and make sure I wash my face at least twice a day, like that pretty much takes care of my acne issues. So it was like, I just stopped all the like herbal medicines with that as well. And even in this new journey of like trying to cut back on more dairy and bread, like I've even noticed that has even helped with like my weight gain as well, and even my shape, because a lot of times you'll see that women with PCOS will have like a larger stomach area, and so I would have that issue as well. But once I started changing my diet around, that started to help out as well. So for me, diet and nutrition has been a big part of like my mental health, because I remember when I was like 27, around that same age, again, stress is a big part of any type of health issue. Like stress will make the body feel worse than anything, in my personal opinion. And so once I started, when I was like 27, that's when I started to have like serious weight gain. And my diet hadn't changed that much because I was still eating relatively clean. Like every now and then I would have some fast food, but for the most part, still eating relatively clean. And I just started gaining weight out of nowhere. Like that's when I became a thickums. And especially when I was with my ex, like I gained a lot of weight then too. And I started to like realize that it was because of my PCOS. So that was something I dealt with. But as I've started to like eliminate my stress, make some diet changes around bread and dairy, my shape has gotten a lot better too. I need to get back to working out. So, and not necessarily for body reasons, even though it does help my body, but more so because it's good for the mental health as well. And I also think it's important to talk about body image when it comes to talking about health, because just because you're skinny doesn't mean that you're healthy, and just because you're big doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. Again, somebody with PCOS can be eating great, can be working out, but you're not going to lose weight because of the hormone issues. And you can eat unhealthily and still be skinny. Like some people just have high metabolisms. And so I think that that's a big part of body image is a big part of talking about health as well. And at some point I want to do like a more in-depth take on body image. But yeah, body image has been a big thing over my life. And I just remember like always feeling like I was just so big. And a lot of that was because of like some of the messaging that I was getting, but also because I would always be like the biggest person out of my friend group and things like that. But every time I look back at old pictures, I'd be like, girl, you was so small. Like I was so small, but I would be thinking that I was so big. And just like I had to realize that I really do have body dysmorphia. And so I always, again, try to reframe my mind to be like, girl, this probably going to be the smallest you're going to be. So you better take advantage of it while you have it and live your life and still have your confidence. And even like being a thicker woman, like I'm starting to get skinnier now, again, eliminating stress and making those diet changes. But I remember like enjoying being a thick woman. Like it's nothing like being a thicker girl and like, you know, pumping through the scene. Like you really shake the room. Like if you a big girl with confidence, you really move a room. Like the way that people like, okay, like give you that, like, okay, I see you. Like there is nothing like it. So when I talk about health, I'm not necessarily talking about body image and weight and things like that, because the two are not the same. But yeah, that has been my health journey in a lot of ways. Like it has been very like, it's been a journey. It has definitely been a journey. But I'm glad that it's a journey that I've been embarking on, because I really get into it. Like I really love looking at how health or how nutrition can have such an impact on your health, and even movement. I grew up with asthma, so it was like I couldn't be too active anyway, even though there have been many successful athletes that have asthma. But for me, I was just like, this is too much. Like, not being able to breathe, like, it's really not that necessary. So I never really grew up being an active child, but starting to do movement and seeing how it does impact my mood, I feel like has been really great. It's just like the energy sometimes that it takes to overcome like that threshold to be able to actually do it is like, ooh, child. But I'm gonna get back to it. And yeah. So for Don't Be Rude, I wanted to talk about white people, which is not necessarily like a current topic right now, even though, white people are always an interesting topic to talk about. But I'm recording this in advance, and so I wanted to talk about something that will still, hold true whenever I release the episode. And it's so interesting the way that sometimes Black people will clutch their pearls when I start talking about white people. And it's a very normal thing around a lot of the people, and I would say in my generation, and just like the people that I'm around in political spaces as well. It's open conversations that we have. But I do acknowledge, like, especially for older generations, it's like you couldn't necessarily have open conversations about whiteness and white people. So I try to have patience around the way that people receive the way that I speak about white people sometimes. But it's like, white people know that white people are ridiculous. Like, it is not a secret. Like, everybody knows that whiteness and white people are ridiculous. Like, so it's not a secret. I think the biggest thing is just like people who openly talk about it. But I am thankful that I live in a generation that, like, similar to mental health, it is more acceptable to talk about whiteness more openly. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I went to a HBCU, so I did not spend a lot of time around white people. And I will say, like, even as a child, because my mother worked with a lot of white people, so as a child, like, my views on white people were a lot better just because, like, I always had good experiences with them. Like, it's only one experience that I remember as a child having. I think we were at a library or a museum or something, and it was like this younger black boy, and I was still a kid at that time, but the younger black boy was younger than me and younger than the other person too. And he was like playing with this like dinosaur, or it was something that we was doing around a dinosaur. And he was just like, I don't remember what he said about it, but something about it, I guess, he didn't describe it right. And this little white boy came and was like, it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. First of all, who asked you? Okay. It's a whole lot of black joy happening right here. And you just came over here trying to be the know-it-all. And, I just remember that experience being like, I didn't like that. Like, I don't like that, which is interesting because, depending on the person that you talk to, I can be the know-it-all in the room. So, self-reflection there. But, I really just did not like that. And I remember that was one of those experiences as a child that I remember having of like, I ain't like that. But in general, like dealing with other white people, like, no real issue there. And then when I went to college, like I also, because I went to a HBCU, didn't really have a lot of experiences with white people. Like I had one white professor who I did not get along with. And it was so terrible. Like, it was really bad. Like, everything that I did in that class really offended that man. Like, he took everything about me in that class very personal, I think. And, like, I was telling y'all before, like, I was dealing with real motivation issues. Like, I just wasn't feeling it my sophomore year. And this was that class, and it was botany. Like, I don't want to be in this class. Like, I hate the way that we learn about botany because it's so removed from the real life experience of like agriculture, and it's so boring. And it's like plants are really exciting, but the way that we learn about them is so boring. And I didn't like dealing with lack of motivation, the content of the class, like I wasn't there for it. Like I literally showed up so that I did not get fined. And this man took it so personal. And I'm just like, sir, let me tell you something. Okay, Mr. Sir, don't do too much. Like that was really the come to Jesus moment that we had to have. Like, sir, I know you're a professor. I'm a student. I may not be your best student, but don't cut up too much now. So, nonetheless, and then I had internship experiences, which was just like, once again, just like people being somewhat shocked that I could read and write. It was just a very weird thing to me because in Black spaces, you're just expected, like, it's not a clap or a pat on the back that you can read and write. So it was just weird having those experiences where being around white people and sometimes other people of color who were not Black, other non-Black people that would just be shocked that I could like form sentences. It was a very strange experience for me that I did not encounter until I was a young adult. So the majority of the white people that I know, and really all of the white people that I know, I didn't meet until I started doing movement work. And, I say like, I know 3 good white people and 2 possibles. Like, that's all I got on the good white people scale. And even the white people that I know, like, we will have serious conversations about whiteness. Like, I really struggle with the power dynamics that can recreate themselves in movement spaces where a lot of times you will see a lot of white people trying to tell Black people and other people of color what to do. But especially, I feel like you'll see that especially in Black neighborhoods. And then in general, like, I didn't know this, but some of the biggest nonprofit organizations are white led. And it's like, and I'm talking about organizing, because of course, but organizing organizations are white led. And it's like, y'all don't need the money. Like, and I do understand that there are poor white people. So I'm not talking about like, yes, poor white people need investment too, but I'm talking about like, you got Black organizations struggling for dollars. And even in this system, organizing system, white people are still bringing in the majority of the resources. And it's not just about money, but resources in general that, again, is disproportionately helping disenfranchised white people more than it's helping disenfranchised Black people and other people of color. So it's like this system is still recreating itself over and over and over again. So that has been a big issue, and I have had to address issues of whiteness with white people in movement spaces. Like, no, you're not going to get away with this behavior. So, yeah, we've had to have some difficult conversations, but I prefer to engage with white people who are at least trying to make the world a better place. Like, yeah, they have been shaped by white supremacy just like the rest of us. So, of course, there are going to be some issues. There are going to be some conversations that we have to have. But if I'm going to be interacting with white people, I would prefer to interact with white people who at least can acknowledge white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy and all of the things of the such. So yeah, even with the good white people that I know, I still have to have hard conversations with them. So I don't know why it be such a big issue when I discuss white people, but neither here nor there. I believe in the ability of all people to transform, including white people. So I have faith and hope that, the world will continue to become a better place. And more white people will start to become open to the impact that they have on this world. And I'm always very adamant, and a lot of people that I know are very adamant that, like, yes, slavery was a long time ago. However, the impact of slavery still exists today, and there is new oppression happening every day. Like, oppression did not end with slavery. So we should not stop talking about oppression, white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. So yeah, white people, get it together. Like, look at our world right now. Like, we have multiple genocides going on right now. Like, just the world is in shambles. Okay, the world is in shambles, and I know the Christians like to talk about these is the end times, and I don't get into that because I'm like, I don't know what time that we in, but I do know is that we need to do better. We all need to do better. Okay, we all need to do better, but most especially white people. So I'm rooting for y'all. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm rooting for y'all. Humanity depends on y'all getting it together. It really does. And so I'm sending energy that y'all heed this message and get it together. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not even gonna go there. But I was like, for some reason, like Iggy Azalea and like other white artists just came to mind. That's a whole nother conversation to talk about as far as like cultural appropriation and things of the such. And at some point, I'm sure we'll get deeper into that. But just get it together. Get it together. Okay. I'm thinking about like Bad Baby and Bobby Althoff or whatever her name is, who I like to call Bad Bobby, because y'all let this woman get away with so much. Like, y'all really let her get away with so much. And I have learned how to like have more patience for her, because one, I didn't know that she was as young as she is. So I don't remember her exact age, but I know she's still in her 20s. And I'm like, I don't really like to like go in on people who are younger than me, because it's like we all have had to have growth. And then also she has openly talked about like some of the suicidal issues that she has had as well. So I'm starting to give her more grace, but in general, like, I'm not really a Bobby fan, and she just gets away with way too much for being like, you know, an innocent white girl. And it's like, she has appropriated so much culture, not as bad as Bad Baby and Iggy Azalea and the types, but she is, you know, she's on that spectrum. And I just like, you know, I understand, like, I feel like Black people interact with her because they want to get her views, which, like, you know, is a wise business decision to make. But I really, like, am not a fan of Bobby. Like, I haven't seen all of her episodes, but I have seen a good amount of them. And like the first Black woman you had on there, you asked her to teach you how to dance. And the second Black woman you had on there, you had her on there cooking fried chicken. And again, both of them women went on there and got them views and got their coin. But at the same time, like, Bobby, you should know better than that. Okay. I don't know where you grew up and what your influences were, but you should know better than both of those, especially in today's society. Like, people are more conscious than they've ever been. And this is what this is the entertainment that you're creating. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I wish you much transformation, and I'm gonna leave it at that. But as far as greatest place on earth, affirmations today, I want to send good energy to everybody working on health goals, like health goals of all sorts. But I'm sending good energy, like whatever your goal is, you got this. Me, I'm going to be getting back to movement, doing more movement. So going for my walks and my runs and doing a little bit of arm and ab workouts. That's like, I keep it very, you know, I'm not a very cutesy, very demure kind of girl, but I do keep it very cutesy and very demure when it comes to working out. So I probably do like 30 minutes altogether, and I have a goal of doing at least 3 times a week. But yeah, it's very like, I don't be out there like trying to go too hard. Like 30 minutes altogether. My walk and my run is probably around like 15 to 20 minutes altogether. I'm gonna give you a cute 3-minute run. That's it. I'm trying to work up to 10 minutes though, and I'm gonna get there. Like, I believe in myself. I'm going to get there. But I'll be ready to die after those 3 minutes, and don't let me go up to 4. Like, now you really pushing it. So I'm working on health goals, and I'm sending good energy to anybody else out there that's working on health goals. Like, we got this. We got this. So see y'all. See y'all.
Violation.
We don't even call these men our men. These be our friends. Never give your all to a man. You don't fall for that man. Take a trip, make him ball friend. Never date a broke man. Joke man. Always gotta smoke man. Potential but no hope